Hi, we're here today talking with Dr. Chris Blazina about his new book, Secret Lives of Men. Chris, I wonder if you'd give me a little background on what compelled you to write the book.
Sure. I'll tell you a story. When I was writing the book, I was telling people, I'm writing a book about the secret lives of men. I got some great replies. Probably my favorite one was, so you're writing a book explaining the psychology of men. Will that be some type of pop-up book? So when you get answers or replies like that, I realize you have to suspend people's disbelief about men and complexity being mutually exclusive. So there's an important point in the book that men's lives are complex. Sometimes they're hidden, but they have to be uncovered to be understood and seen, to be seen, that complexity to be seen. So that's a big part of the spirit behind the book.
Okay. So can men and women actually ever be friends?
That's an important one, I think. The book talks about how men are socialized, something I talk about in terms of man training. And the socialization has to do with the 10 commandments of growing up male. And some of those commandments are contradictory and very confusing, and they're difficult for men. The commandments have to do with governing lots of the areas in men's lives, and that includes emotions. So one of the prime commandments has to do with fearing the feminine. Boys have been taught, it's part of the blueprint that's been around for more than 100 years, boys have been taught that they're supposed to really sever any kind of ties with anything construed feminine at a very early age, maybe 5 years old, sometimes even as young as 2 years old. And the problem with this, there's lots of problems, but one of the big problems is that sometimes boys are asked to cut ties with things that are stereotypically labeled as feminine, but it's really not. It's more of a universal experience, part of our psychological heritage. So a big part of that has to do with the breadth and depth of emotions. When you talk about men learn to fear the feminine, a lot of times the offshoot of that is they're not supposed to have a rich emotional life because that belongs in the women's world. In reality, that's not a man thing or a woman thing, that's a human thing. And we end up asking boys to really kind of leave an important part of who they are behind as they grow up. So how does this all figure into the man and women being friends? I think about the metaphor of a box of Crayola crayons. If you had like a box of 64, that would represent an emotion each would represent an emotion, that wide range of different things that we experience as human beings. But in male socialization and man training, really that's condensed to 2 crayons in the box, love and sex. Now, men are not really socialized to express outwardly any more than love and sex, but that doesn't mean they don't experience that. It just oftentimes gets funneled into one of those socially sanctioned emotions. So how this plays out, potentially, is that it gets very confusing for men in terms of what they actually experience, but also confusing for romantic partners and friends. So if a man is angry, you don't know if he's really angry. You might need a secret decoder ring because he might actually be experiencing emotions that are off limits, like vulnerability or insecurity or shame or embarrassment. But as a man, you're not allowed to throw that out there. But what you can do is funnel it into emotion that has been sanctioned, so anger. So you don't know quite really what you're getting. So can men and women actually be friends? The difficulty here is, again, that kind of crunch in emotions. Men oftentimes in their socialization learn that tender feelings are always associated as a precursor for sex. So that's a big problem. It's a big problem because that's not always the case, whether that's with their best male friends or female friends. But in a romantic partnership, it's so difficult for men to potentially get beyond all the socialization that goes with being a man to say, I'm going to open up. They usually do that just for one person, the person they really have pegged as, oh, that's the person I want to spend my life with, or potential romantic partner. So can they actually be friends? Yes, but it takes some sorting out to do that.
Okay, so that degree of intimacy that we're talking about here is difficult for men to find, and how does that fit in with the shoebox?
Yeah, that's a good transition. Secret Shoebox is really the heart of the book. It is that metaphoric place inside a man where he keeps his innermost thoughts, feelings, and recollections. And this can be a collection of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So men have been taught that they should be cautious about opening the lid on that metaphoric box. They'd like very much to share with people who are closest in their lives, but they learn in man training that if they share parts of the contents, it might be misunderstood because men don't have those feelings or reactions. It can also be that men learn that those contents can be used against them at inappropriate times. So better to keep the lid on top of the shoebox, a lot of men kind of come away with. So the spirit of the book is really to try to understand more about male socialization that keeps the lid on tight and what you can potentially do in a relationship to maybe open that some, whether that's in a romantic relationship or with a family member or a friend.
So the key to the book is to try to get men to move past fear and confusion, or to their partners to understand their fear and confusion. Is that?
And that's a big part. The spirit is to help men find an authentic signature way of being a man. And one of the difficulties, and I'll reference again the 10 Commandments of Growing Up Male, has to do with usually there's a one-size-fits-all notion of how to be a man. All men feel like, okay, we all have to be carbon copies of each other. Instead, what I argue in the book is that it does take a rugged sense of individualism to find your own path, find your own way of being a man, whether that's being a stay-at-home dad, whether it's being a man who runs a business, or a man who interviews other people for a living. It takes a sense of courage and authenticity to kind of brace who you are. And the offshoot of that is if you're able to find that particular path, it has long-range repercussions for other things in your life. It really does affect other places like areas of work and love. It makes for a better life, essentially.
So if we look at your book, what would you like men to take away from the book, and what would you like female readers to take away from the book?
Yeah, I think it's really important when men read the book, it's important to know that their experiences are unique, that the socialization that they read about, that they can relate to and say, oh yes, I've experienced some of that, or I know somebody who has been affected by that. And while those experiences might be unique, that they're not alone. It's important to know that. For women who read the book, I think it really will provide some kind of, at times, secret decoder ring to men's lives. So it does really help understand what's the common ground. It helps understand, really, the secret lives of men. It provides a bridge to a better life, better connection with the important men in their lives.
Okay, I'm sure our listeners and watchers would like to get a little bit more information about this. Where can they access some information in addition to the book?
Sure. The website is www.thesecretlivesofmen.com.
Great. Look forward to hearing more about it.
All right. Thank you for having me on.